Hey, this is Toby Geiger, and you're listening to Drop the Hammer Podcast, Election Edition. Okay, good. Hey, this is our introductory episode of Drop the Hammer Podcast. Here we are in Goshen, of all places, and we're going to get started. This is episode number 1. I want to tell everybody a little bit about myself. I'm a 5th generation that has been enjoying Tyler Lake. I'm going to share a little story to start this off so people know the whole history of the whole thing. My grandmother's grandfather had a farm in Cornwall on Flat Rocks Road, Phillips Roth's former house. I'm sure that he has it a little bit nicer than when it was my grandmother, which is Shirley Thompson. So that's a Thompson name, which goes way back in Goshen. And the stories that we have heard that we never quite understood was that her grandfather used to take his 2 boys fishing at Tyler Lake. So obviously this was mid-1800s, and we always wondered why they didn't just horse and buggy over to Lake Warmog. So the best that my father and I can figure out is likely going up and down the more steep hills was much more difficult on the horse's knees. And that probably is correct. Whereas from Flat Rocks Road, if you just went down to the old schoolhouse in the center of Milton and took a left on Shear Shop, you could end up on a relatively flat trip to famous Tyler Pond, as she always referred to it as. And these 2 boys enjoyed fishing with their father at Tyler Lake so much that they continued enjoying Tyler Lake, and they used to go to Mr. Green's store, which is where Harmon has his irrigation company. That used to be a general store. Most people know that. They used to rent oars from Mr. Green and then go down the backside of Sandy Beach to his cottage. And that's where he would rent the boats. They would do some fishing. To make a long story short, my great-grandfather bought Mr. Green's cottage, and his brother bought the cottage next door, which is the Rusbazen cottage. And they enjoyed it through the late 1800s into the early 1900s. And that's how we end up here at Tyler Lake. And I wanted to say that I'm in the process of, I've bought 4 houses in Goshen. I'm a long-standing community member anyways, especially at Tyler Lake. And so for me, my parents had met here at Tyler Lake. It was the Summers had a cottage on Tyler Lake that my father now owns, and that's where he met his girlfriend, Becky, and that happens to be my mother. Although they met very young, they got married, and they had 2 kids, my brother Brant and I, and then their marriage fell apart, and they got divorced. My family obviously had always had a summer residence at Tyler Lake. I moved here full-time with my father in 1980, because after the divorce, I lived with my mother, and we moved all over the country, really Ohio, and all over Connecticut more than anywhere. So since 1980, I've lived full-time here in Goshen, mostly at Tyler Lake, although I own a house to the right of the studio, to the left if you're facing it. I finished high school here at Wamogo. Then I went on to college at UConn, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree. After that, I started working during college, I worked at the Torrington Company in Morris, part-time during the summers and whatnot. After that, I went to UPS, worked there for 5 years. Then I decided to become a police officer, so I was hired in the city of New Britain. I worked there for 3 or 4 years. Then I transferred from there, because it was such a long ride every day, to New Britain, to Torrington PD. I worked there for 13 years. And then from there, I went on to Beacon Falls and finished out my last 3 years there. And I finished a 20-year career in law enforcement, which was very rewarding. It was a love and hate situation, because it's not the easiest work, but you have to love that kind of work to be into it. After that was over, or even before I had gotten out of police work, I opened up the Drop the Hammer gun shop. That was relatively successful for 3 years. We did a booming business, $1.6 million during those 3 years. My business partner and I had a falling out, and so that business inevitably failed. So in the process of applying to the police department, I had met my wife, Johanna. We've been married for 25 years. We have 3 children. Ian, who's 22, he just graduated from UConn as well. My daughter, Eva, is 20 years old. She's at the University of Hartford in a communications, English, AI kind of major. And then my youngest son, Tyler, famously named, is into carpentry at Oliver Wolcott. So he's, like me, loves to work with his hands and things like that. So I have since retired from the police department. I'm presently a property manager. I work exclusively in Woodridge Lake, where I manage 20 houses during the summer and 50 houses during the winter. And that consumes most of my work schedule, which I really enjoy doing that. And so then I decided 2 years ago to run for Board of Finance because I thought that it would be advantageous to myself and to the town that I begin to get involved. My father had 16 years on the Board of Finance in Litchfield, and I believe 6 years as the chairman. That was during all of the Leone as the superintendent for both schools, and they started chatting about forming or regionalization of Wamogo and Litchfield, which I really wasn't a fan of. I didn't think that we've had any success nationwide in regionalization. You can look at 10 or 20 examples. It's a very difficult situation to manage. So my father and I have had many heated debates in regards to its success or not. And as most of us in Goshen know, that ideology was sold to all of us, that it was going to save the communities $4 million. And so that's how it was pitched roughly 12 to 14 years ago. People got behind it and it got some traction. People love to save money and have lower taxes. But as we know, what inevitably happened was it's going to cost us, instead of saving $4 million, it's going to cost us $3.2 million at a $46 million budget, which I think will very soon topple $50 million. So I was a little perturbed by that idea, and I decided to get more involved. So now my next venture is with Todd Carasillo, where we have formed the Independent Party, right? We're unaffiliated. He's running for first selectman. I'm running for selectman. And as a lot of people that are paying attention realize that there's a lot of chaos in town hall, in the library, in the weekly meetings. We have a true antagonist who loves to create issues in town for no other reason other than to create issues. And so I'm working with Todd Carasillo. I hope that everybody will consider his leadership, his experience is paramount to the success of Goshen, because you don't just walk into a 10, 12, or $14 million business, which is what the town of Goshen is, and just be able to run it and understand all of the complexities that take place in running a town. So if people like low taxes, as I do, they like things to work efficiently, I'm throwing my hat in the ring, and I hope that we can have a successful campaign, and hopefully we'll turn out winners, and we'll keep Goshen on the rails, we'll keep our taxes low, and we can start to work together instead of this constant chaos that we have in the library. At every town meeting, that one famous individual, Lynette Miller, seems to want to drive Goshen right into the ground for her own personal gain. I often refer to her as the puppet master in town on Facebook, which I'm relatively active on. But essentially, the idea of the podcast is to get the word out, speak of the community concerns. We have the tank issue on School Hill Road. We have issues with the quality of the road. Some people are happy with it, and some people are unhappy with it, the paving of some dirt roads. But as Goshen grows, we all have to stay open-minded in regards to all different ideas. Now, one of my best talents is the ability to empathize with people and work across party lines, which many people probably don't know is that I've been a registered Democrat for 40 years, although the Democratic Party left me a long time ago. I'm a Democrat who believes, like JFK, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. That doesn't seem to be the present day ideology. And they had blocked me on Facebook, the Democratic Town Committee. So that had energized me to become unaffiliated. And it worked out perfectly for me anyway, because once I became unaffiliated, I started thinking that I could make a run at the selectman's office. And I think people should realize that I'm very financially sound. I understand government from the inside out, 20 years working in the government. I can give many examples of the flaws that I see in town. One flaw is we had a selectman that was pitching the idea of buying a used tractor for the town. The reason that you don't buy used equipment for government is the 100-year plan. A lot of people don't realize that the Government 101 class begins with the 100-year plan. You have to always in the back of your mind, you're thinking 100 years down the road for the town. If you're the first selectman, if you're the mayor, if you're the governor, if you're the president, you're always looking 100 years down the road. And what's the most advantageous situation 100 years from now? So when you buy a tractor, and the life of industrial machine tends to be about 30 years. It's different if you run a small business. You're looking at 1-year goals, 5-year goals, 10-year goals. But government has to keep more in mind much farther down the road than you do in business. So when you buy a used tractor at today's prices, which let's call it $200,000, if you buy one 5 years old with no warranty, who has 800 hours on it already, the life expectancy is already 25 years instead of 30 years. So that forces the town in 25 years to buy another tractor. Well, in 25 years with 3% inflation, that's roughly 78% higher cost than today's dollars. So now you have to spend, let's just call it shy of $400,000. And that's a big expense for the town in 25 years versus pushing it out 30 years. So using that as just a little example of the difference between some of the selectmen that we have on the Board of Selectmen now versus what I'm going to bring to the table. As 190 Sharon Turnpike was a bit of controversy. I was absolutely opposed to the town of Goshen getting into the real estate business. I don't think that we should be buying pieces of property. We had an opportunity 20 some odd years ago to buy. At that time, it was a tractor store, right, in the center of town. Now it's a Ducey Kitchen, right? Last was. Maybe that would have been a good purchase at $378,000, but I contacted Mr. Leary and I said, the town hall is fine. The school is not asking for more space. It's a small community. Why would we want to spend excess of $350,000, renovate this new building to make it a town hall? We were against it then, and I was against it then. If you remember, Selectman O'Leary was also in favor of a resident trooper in town. A resident trooper costs the town $250,000 a year. I'm not in favor of that either. I've worked for the resident trooper's office in Beacon Falls, and although the guys have the best intention, there isn't a lot of crime during 7 to 3. So you end up having to get another resident trooper, like Litchfield has, from 3 to 11. So now we're at $500,000. What happens is, look at the Woodridge Lake community, or where there was a car stolen last summer or the summer before on School Hill Road. It happens after midnight. Therefore, you're pushed in a way to get a resident trooper for midnight. So now you've spent $750,000 of today's dollars to have 3 state troopers patrolling just the town. I like the idea of accessing Troop B for incidents like that. Let the townspeople come together. We can call 911. We can call Troop B. We can save the town $500,000, $750,000. People might know that I was the neighborhood watch coordinator. And although I had a little friction over at Woodridge Lake, they didn't really enjoy these opinions that I have on how it should operate. There's many evenings when I happen to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning that I decide to go for a little cruise to see what's going on at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I very casually just happened to choose Woodridge Lake. I'm buying a piece of property, a home in Woodridge Lake, so now I'm even more motivated to see what's going on at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I have been unsuccessful of bumping into anybody at Woodridge Lake that was doing some illegal or improper behavior. We've had cars that the doors are getting open. In that case, what's happening is they're looking for some change. But last summer, we had some rather interesting developments that on a night where it was pouring rain, we had two individuals going into cars and taking the remote openers to the doors, the garage doors. And so that tells any logical thinking person that clearly they're interested in getting into the home at different hours. So that can be a little more alarming. The other alarming fact is guys looking for quarters and change to buy a couple bags of heroin generally also don't like to go out in the rain. So when I heard that they were going to these houses I'm talking about heavy rainstorms, there's a lot of motivation there. And that's what people need to be concerned about. And so what I suggested is maybe we form we establish more of a neighborhood watch. We have some captains. And I didn't push the topic because it didn't seem to really get a lot of traction. And that's okay. We're a bedroom community now, like we always have been. But what I think people have to realize is that the area is changing with Torrington getting out of the industrialization aspect where everybody's going to work. We have a lot of group homes. We have some not so great individuals that get in trouble in Waterbury and they move them up to Torrington, and that's how this manifests itself. So I think that we have to establish more of a neighborhood watch. We have to form better communication amongst each other, not only at Woodridge Lake, but in all these communities in Goshen. And we have to start to work together and get this chaos that's created and the strings that get pulled by the puppet I really have undetermined what her motivation is. We would think that making Goshen great, we would all be on the same page, right? Who wouldn't want Goshen to be great, right? And so we have to figure out a way to get the divisiveness in Goshen. I've met Seth Brickell many times. He's soft-spoken, very polite, educated. He appears highly intelligent. He seems like a great person. But to have somebody to walk into a $12 million operation takes a couple years to learn. And as a long-standing Goshen resident, one thing that brings us all here is the affordability. The mill rate in Torrington is just shy of 50. We're at, I believe, 16.8. I like the idea of getting Goshen into single digits. People say that's impossible, but it is not impossible. I won't take up all of this podcast to explain it, but we have some exciting guests coming in. We have our first scheduled guest will be Todd Carasillo. We're going to bring in some speakers in regards to the issue on School Hill Road. There's some of the oil tanks, the permit applications. We're going to do that. We're going to have all kinds of exciting future here at Drop the Hammer Podcast, and I hope that you'll join me on this journey, and I hope that you continue to watch, and we'll go from there. Thank you.